For as long as I can remember, the open world represented the purest form of video game freedom. To hear that a game was open world meant that it intended to gift its players with boundless potential, unshackled by the confines of linear levels. For years, I was obsessed with them, completely infatuated with the novelty of going wherever I wanted. Lately, though, something's wrong. With a lot of open world games, the novelty is gone. The fun, nowhere to be found. What's going on here? Houston, we've got an open world problem. I recently attempted to play through Horizon Forbidden West. The Horizon series stands as one of PlayStation's marquee open-world franchises. I played its predecessor, Zero Dawn, a few years ago, and while I finished the game, something felt off. I was hoping that Forbidden West would present opportunity for a fresh start, and yet, as I got into the game, I was soon plagued with that sinking suspicion that I wasn't really enjoying myself. This certainly wasn't the first time that I'd felt this playing an open-world game, and it's a feeling that profoundly bothers me. I want to understand this feeling. Why do some open worlds work while others fall flat? Well, let's dig a little deeper here.
You know who I am.
Red hair, bow, fights better than 10 warriors put together. You're well known.
Without question, the foundational element of any open world game is, the world. It would be easy to assume that all open worlds are relatively similar, but of course, we know that couldn't be further from the truth. There exists innumerable variation in how these spaces are stitched together, with some working better than others. It's vital to remember when crafting an open world that it's not just the world. It's not just the space that houses the game's missions and NPCs. The world needs to be consistently compelling in its own right, even if you strip away all of the other elements. Let's take the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim to help illustrate my point. Skyrim features countless side quests and skill trees, but let's look past all of that for a moment. Even without the garnish, Skyrim remains pretty damn compelling. This is a world with seemingly endless secrets to discover. You may stumble onto a cave in a cliffside, only to find yourself plumbing its depths for the next hour. It's a world that practically begs you to explore it. Let's compare that to Horizon. Now, one point that I want to make right off the bat is that I haven't finished this game. I've only put about 10 hours into it, so please take what I say with at least a couple grains of salt. It's entirely possible that some of my thoughts would change if I played more, but because of what I'll be describing in this video, I don't really want to play anymore. The world of Horizon is irrefutably beautiful. The game is a stone-cold stunner, sure to impress anyone that may pass by the television. From a fidelity perspective, it puts a game like Skyrim to shame, and yet, when I let loose to run around Forbidden West's world, I just didn't feel compelled to explore it. It felt laborious. Suddenly, I was faced with a map containing countless icons to check off, and I didn't really care to see what they were. Okay, but why didn't you care, Wilson? Doesn't every open world game present you with a big open map full of countless icons? More or less, sure. Let's unpack why it didn't work for me here. The first issue pertains to mobility. As time has passed and game worlds have gotten even bigger, a lot of developers have come to realize that it's not enough to simply provide the player with two legs. The act of moving through the world shouldn't just be a means to an end, it should be engaging in its own right. We needn't look any further than Insomniac's Spider-Man games as an example. As I discussed in my previous video about movement in games, one of Spider-Man's biggest strengths is that it finally delivered satisfying web slinging. You're free to swing and glide all over the city, meaning that you can cross the entirety of the map in just a few minutes. Beyond just being fun, the movement contains depth, enabling the player to actively grow better at doing it the more that they play. This turns the act of traveling from one location to another into something almost as fun as what you'll do when you get there. This series features a perfectly functional fast travel system, but I've never even used it, the ultimate testament to how rewarding its traversal is. Horizon, on the other hand, lacks this same magic. Aloy, the game's protagonist, is certainly nimble and beautifully animated, but moving her around the world feels fairly pedestrian. You can mount some of the world's mechanical creatures to move more quickly, but I never wanted to bother doing so in either Horizon game, as it's not very fun. You can also climb on plenty of surfaces, which is appreciated, but is pretty standard for a lot of games nowadays, open world or otherwise. I do want to give the game credit for introducing a glide ability, enabling Aloy to jump off any surface, no matter how high it may be. This surely seems inspired by The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and should become standard in most open-world games as far as I'm concerned. I'm not claiming that traversal here detracts from the experience, but it didn't enhance it either. We've mostly spoken about the worlds themselves so far, but what about what you're actually doing in them? The missions within an open world game are easy to forget about, but they matter a lot. I didn't complete a ton of main missions in Horizon, but I want to touch on one that I did here. Long story short, I ended up breaking into an old facility looking for something to keep it vague in case you intend to play. The mission itself took about 45 minutes and consisted of me doing, well, not a whole lot. There was a lot of slow traversal, which often found me falling into the water and having to do it over again. It dawned on me with painful clarity during this mission that I just wasn't having any fun. One of the biggest issues I've come to find with open world games is that the scope of the experience often comes at the expense of the fun. So much of your time is spent just getting to the next thing, which speaks again to why engaging mobility is so important. But even within missions, you're often tasked with just maneuvering to the next area of interest. There was nothing that compelled me in this facility mission. I was just climbing around, slightly confused about where to leap next. Now, yes, the mission did culminate in some combat, and I recognize that I was early in the game, but how long do I tolerate not having fun before I just move on to the next line in the backlog? I don't really want to climb around this big space, or tail two characters having a conversation without being detected. It sometimes feels that so many resources and so much effort goes into the world and lore of a game like this that the developer can lose sight of what's actually enjoyable. Grandeur only takes you so far if what you're materially, tangibly doing isn't compelling. And of course, that's not to say that all you're doing in Horizon Forbidden West is running from point A to B. Combat is a foundational part of the experience, which finds Aloy shooting all manner of arrows into a myriad of robotic animal baddies. In the first Horizon game, combat was an element that kept me engaged when other areas let me down, but here in Forbidden West, not even that clicked with me. I won't dig into why it didn't specifically, as this isn't a review of Horizon, but I want to quickly highlight a game that delivered fully on this front. Ghost of Tsushima is a game I finally played earlier this year, and I loved it. I loved it for a number of reasons, but one of the biggest was the combat. Unlike Horizon, Ghost is largely predicated upon close quarters melee combat, and man, it just feels fantastic. It's quick, it's brutal, and it's consistently engaging for dozens of hours. Again, I don't want to get too caught up in the minutia of why combat did or didn't work for me in these two games. The point is that because I loved combat so much in Ghost, even if another element of that game let me down, the joy of taking on a group of bad guys would always make up for it. If I saw some enemies in the distance, I almost always made a beeline for them, providing me with experience points to progress my character, and often leading me to discover a new point of interest organically. Without that constant pull in Horizon, I had even less to motivate my persistence.
I'm here, as promised. It's singing. Does it mean the chorus is ready?
It is assembled. I couldn't have done it without Varl.
If there's one element that I think almost every open world game struggles with, it's narrative. The story in most of them ends up feeling almost entirely forgettable. To some degree, that's due to the very structure of these games. Since the player can often go anywhere and do whatever they want, you can easily spend 5 hours messing around before you get back to proper story progression. Developers have to account for this unpredictability, which often leads to stories that don't require as much focus or attention from the player. There seems to exist an assumption that narrative prowess and A-grade writing just aren't as important in open-world games, but I'd beg to differ. Just take a look at a game like Red Dead Redemption 2. It features one of the best stories and complex protagonists I've ever experienced in a video game, open world or otherwise. The narrative effort greatly enhances the journey and is unquestionably worth the time and labor such effort calls for. Sadly, as you may expect, Horizon suffers from the typical issues. Much of the dialogue amounts to little more than dry exchanges of information and foreign terminology. The characters lack depth, and many conversations are held within the confines of static shots behind someone's shoulder. Again, this is all entirely subjective, but I often feel so disconnected from the narrative and characters of an open-world game, and Forbidden West exemplifies this painfully perfectly. A video game is like a machine, with countless gears attempting to operate in harmony to make everything work. Open world games, in particular, feature so many moving parts. They're complex, but the sheer number of elements also means that the occasional defective part doesn't doom the entire entity. Let's use progression as another example. Maybe the story isn't gripping me, maybe the combat isn't clicking, but if I at least feel like my character is making satisfying progress, maybe I can keep chugging along. This can manifest in skill trees with compelling abilities, or even just a steady stream of satisfying passive improvements. But let's say even the progression isn't measuring up, which, yes, was the case for me in Forbidden West. There are only so many failsafes before this machine just can't function. It certainly doesn't help that open world games tend to be such time sinks. Sure, you can beeline it down the golden path, but even that can take 20 plus hours and simply doesn't feel like the right way to play the game. To skip the various side content and hidden areas just feels wrong. Here lies one of the single biggest conundrums with open world games, at least for me. Each one presents a glut of content which my brain immediately feels compelled to tackle. I'm a completionist, whether I want to be or not, so when I open up that map and see 75 little question marks, I can't help but to feel obligated to investigate every single one. The problem is that doing so isn't always fun, but to skip it drives me crazy. This is a me problem, obviously, but it's become increasingly evident that these types of games are designed to appeal to our gaming proclivity to do everything, in the hopes of keeping us glued to the game for as long as possible. I believe that the open world was indeed originally conceived with the intention to gift the player with unprecedented freedom. Many games continue to make good on that promise. I just finally played through Elden Ring earlier this year, which exists as a perfect example. But as these non-linear playgrounds have grown increasingly ubiquitous and feasible, many developers have occasionally lost sight of the potential they truly hold. Now, that isn't to say that I don't love what has become the open world template, for lack of a better term. Mad Max, Ghostwire Tokyo, or even Ghost of Tsushima can be placed into that bucket to varying degrees, and I'm a huge fan of all three. But I think I'm growing ever more aware each year that too much of a good thing isn't so good anymore. But there's just something so alluring about hearing that a game will be open world. I've historically bought so many of them, only to find that I've bitten off way more than I'm able to reasonably chew. Of course, that's on me, and from a personal perspective, the solution to this problem is simply to buy fewer open world games. Focus on the ones that truly excite me and leave the rest for someone else. Who knows, maybe if I weren't so saturated with games, I would have enjoyed Horizon Forbidden West a lot more. By no means is this a bad game, and I'm sure that some of you watching may love it. It's impossible for each game to exist in a vacuum. There is zero doubt in my mind that my ever-looming backlog puts undue pressure on the back of anything that I play, but that's a topic for another video. Regardless of my personal perspectives, it's undeniable that creating an open-world video game is really difficult. It makes sense that developers would opt for the safer, well-tread path when creating them, but this adherence to what works, quote-unquote, can so easily lead to an experience that feels like one we've already played before. Perhaps the most significant issue here is that the common development impulse is to make an open-world game bigger. The scope grows larger and larger, the world expands, and the quest line balloons. A game's square footage is an easy bullet point for the back of the box, but where does that really get you if the mechanics upon which this massive land exists aren't sound? I don't think the solution is necessarily to reduce the scope. Plenty of devs have pulled off quality and quantity. No, the solution, I believe, is for a developer to examine how this open structure actually serves the experience. Why does your game need to be set in an open world? How does that non-linearity enhance the journey you want players to take? Does it facilitate harmony between all of these various parts that compose the whole? Is every gear in this machine turning? If not, maybe it's time to head back to the drawing board. Despite everything I've discussed here, I think the mention of open world will always get me excited. I don't suppose that novelty will ever truly wear off. There's just something about that pure freedom that appeals to our most primal gaming sensibilities. Exploration is one of this medium's most alluring facets, after all. We can only hope that developers will continue to hone their approach to crafting these behemoths. If they can peel away the bloat and create a truly compelling core around which the ambition orbits, the invisible walls will truly dissipate.